May 5, 2023 Unit 13 Land Use Controls, Aesthetic Zoning, Alquist Priolo Special Studies Zone Act. Bulk Zoning, California Environmental Quality Act, Coastal Zone Conservation Act. Comprehensive Zoning. Conditional Public Report. Conditional Use Permit, Conditions, Covenants, Conditions, and Restrictions. Cumulative Zoning. Declaration of Restrictions. Development Impact Fees, Downzoning, Endangered Species Act. Environmental Impact Report. Exclusionary Zoning. General Plan. Historical Designations. Incentive Zoning. Inclusionary Zoning, Interstate Land Sales Full Disclosure Act, National Environmental Policy Act. Negative Declaration. Non-conforming Uses. Non-cumulative Zoning. Partial Zoning. Preliminary Public Report. Public Report, Rezoning. Special Use Permit. Spot Zoning, Subdivided Lands Law, Subdivision Map Act, Upzoning, Variance, Zoning, Aesthetic Zoning, zoning regulations that are intended to preserve or enhance the visual appearance of a particular area, such as a historic district or scenic corridor. Aesthetic zoning can regulate the design, height, materials, and other characteristics of buildings and structures in the area. Alquist Priolo Special Studies Zone Act, a California law that requires geological and seismic safety studies for certain types of development projects located within designated earthquake fault zones. The Alquist Priolo Act is intended to protect public safety by ensuring that buildings and other structures are not constructed on or near active faults. Bulk zoning, zoning regulations that control the size, height, and density of buildings within a particular area. Bulk zoning can regulate the amount of floor area that can be built on a lot, the height of buildings, and other aspects of building design. California Environmental Quality Act, a California law that requires environmental review and analysis for certain types of development projects. The California Environmental Quality Act, CEQA, is intended to ensure that proposed development projects are evaluated for their potential environmental impacts, and that appropriate mitigation measures are implemented to minimize or eliminate those impacts. Coastal Zone Conservation Act, a federal law that established the Coastal Zone Management Program to provide funding and support for coastal states to manage their coastal resources and protect them from development and pollution. The Coastal Zone Conservation Act, CZCA, also created the National Estuarine Research Reserve System to promote research and education on estuarine ecosystems. Comprehensive zoning, zoning regulations that cover all aspects of land use and development within a particular area, including residential, commercial, industrial, and other uses. Comprehensive zoning typically includes regulations on building size and height, setbacks from property lines, density of development, and other aspects of land use and development. Conditional Public Report, a document required by some states, including California, for the sale of newly constructed or proposed condominiums or other common interest developments. The Conditional Public Report contains detailed information about the development, including its features, amenities, financing, and legal structure. Conditional Use Permit, a permit granted by a local zoning authority that allows a property owner to use a property in a manner that is not normally permitted under the zoning regulations for the area. A conditional use permit is granted only after a public hearing and a determination that the proposed use will not adversely affect the surrounding area. Conditions, provisions included in a real estate transaction or agreement that specifies certain requirements or obligations that must be met in order for the transaction to be completed. Conditions can include contingencies, warranties, and other requirements that must be fulfilled in order for the parties to fulfill their obligations under the agreement. Covenants, legally binding promises or obligations that are included in a deed or other real estate document. Covenants can include promises to maintain a property in a certain condition, to refrain from certain activities on the property, or to pay certain fees or assessments. Covenants, conditions, and restrictions, a set of legally binding provisions that are included in a deed or other real estate document to regulate the use and development of a property. Covenants, conditions, and restrictions, CCRs, can include provisions related to the use of the property, architectural and design standards, maintenance and repair obligations, and other requirements. Cumulative zoning, a type of zoning regulation in which each successive zoning category includes all of the permitted uses and requirements of the previous categories. as well as additional requirements or limitations. Cumulative zoning is intended to provide a progressive transition from less intensive to more intensive uses of land within a particular area. Declaration of restrictions, a legal document that sets forth certain restrictions, limitations, and obligations that apply to a particular parcel of real estate. Declarations of restrictions are typically used in planned communities, subdivisions, and other developments to establish uniform standards for property use, maintenance, and appearance. Development impact fees, fees charged by local governments to developers to offset the cost of providing public services and infrastructure associated with new development. Development impact fees can include charges for parks, schools, roads, and other public amenities. Downzoning, the process of changing the zoning classification of a parcel of real estate to a lower density or more restrictive use. Downzoning is often used by local governments to limit growth and preserve open space. Endangered Species Act, a federal law that provides protection for threatened and endangered species of plants and animals, and their habitats. The Endangered Species Act requires federal agencies to consult with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service or the National Marine Fisheries Service before taking any action that may affect a listed species or its habitat. Environmental Impact Report, a report required under the California Environmental Quality Act, CEQA, that analyzes the potential environmental effects of a proposed project or development. Environmental impact reports typically include information on the project's impact on air and water quality, traffic, noise levels, and other environmental factors. Exclusionary zoning, zoning regulations that are designed to exclude certain types of land uses or populations from a particular area. Exclusionary zoning can take many forms, including minimum lot sizes, minimum house sizes, and prohibitions on multifamily housing or affordable housing. Exclusionary zoning is often criticized for contributing to segregation and inequity in housing. General Plan, a comprehensive document that sets forth a community's long-term vision for land use, growth, and development. The General Plan typically includes policies, goals, and objectives related to land use, transportation, housing, public facilities, and other aspects of community life. Historical designations, legal designations that recognize the historical, architectural, or cultural significance of a building or site. Historical designations can include listing on the National Register of Historic Places, designation as a local landmark, or inclusion in a historic district. Incentive zoning, a planning tool used by local governments to encourage developers to provide public amenities or benefits in exchange for increased development rights or other incentives. Incentive zoning can include provisions for affordable housing, open space, public art, or other community benefits. Inclusionary zoning, zoning regulations that require a percentage of new housing units to be affordable for low or moderate income households. Inclusionary zoning is often used by local governments to promote more equitable access to affordable housing. Interstate Land Sales Full Disclosure Act, a federal law that requires developers of certain large real estate projects to provide purchasers with a property report containing detailed information about the development, including a description of the property, the terms of the sale, and any liens or encumbrances on the property. National Environmental Policy Act, a federal law that requires federal agencies to assess the environmental impacts of proposed projects or activities, and to involve the public in the decision-making process. The National Environmental Policy Act requires federal agencies to prepare environmental impact statements or environmental assessments for projects that may have significant environmental effects. Negative Declaration, a document that declares that a proposed project will not have a significant effect on the environment, and therefore does not require the preparation of an environmental impact report under the California Environmental Quality Act. CEQA. Non-conforming uses, uses of property that were illegal at the time they were established, but that no longer conform to current zoning regulations. Non-conforming uses are typically allowed to continue under certain conditions, such as if they do not expand or intensify the non-conformity. Non-cumulative zoning, a zoning approach in which the permitted uses of each parcel of land are specified, rather than allowing a cumulative list of permitted uses that can result in undesirable or incompatible land uses in certain areas. Partial zoning, a zoning approach in which only certain aspects of a property, such as its density or use, are regulated by zoning, while other aspects are not. Preliminary Public Report, a report issued by the California Department of Real Estate that provides information about a new subdivision or development, including the size and location of the project, the types of units being offered, and the developer's financial condition. The preliminary public report is issued before the developer begins selling units in the project. Public report, a report issued by the California Department of Real Estate that provides detailed information about a new subdivision or development, including the location, size, and type of units being offered, the developer's financial condition, and any special features or amenities of the project. The public report is required by law to be provided to all prospective purchasers before they sign a contract to purchase a unit in the project. Rezoning, the process of changing the zoning classification of a piece of property, typically from one use category to another, such as from residential to commercial. Special use permit, a permit that allows a property owner to use their property in a way that is not normally permitted by the zoning regulations, typically for a specific period of time and subject to certain conditions. Spot zoning, the process of singling out a small area of land for use that is not consistent with the surrounding area or the existing zoning regulations. Subdivided lands law, a California law that requires developers of subdivisions to file a public report with the state, which includes information about the development and the developer's financial condition. The law is designed to protect consumers from fraudulent or misleading sales practices by developers. Subdivision Map Act, a California law that regulates the subdivision of land into smaller parcels. The law requires developers to submit a tentative map of the proposed subdivision for review and approval by the local government before the development can proceed. Upzoning, the process of changing the zoning regulations to allow for more intense or dense development, typically in response to a perceived need for more housing or commercial development in an area. Variance, a variance is a request made to a local zoning board or government agency to deviate from certain zoning requirements, such as setback or height restrictions, due to unique circumstances or hardships related to a specific property. The applicant must demonstrate that the variance is necessary due to some exceptional condition or circumstance, and that it will not be detrimental to the public welfare. Zoning, the process of dividing land into different areas, or zones, for specific uses, such as residential, commercial, industrial, or agricultural. Zoning regulations establish rules for the type and intensity of development allowed in each zone, as well as setbacks, height restrictions, parking requirements, and other standards. The purpose of zoning is to promote orderly and compatible land use patterns, protect public health and safety, and maintain property values. Zoning is typically enforced by local government agencies and zoning boards. Zoning is public control of land use and is permitted under the constitutional doctrine of police power. Police power allows governmental units to enact legislation for the health, safety, morals, and general welfare of the community. Besides covering use, zoning sets standards for height, open space, setbacks, parking, lot size, building size, and similar issues. Zoning can even cover aesthetics and serve to limit growth. California has no uniform requirement for zoning symbols. For example, uses allowable under the designation M3 might vary greatly from area to area. Therefore, one who wants to determine how land in a particular area is zoned must first determine the meaning of the zoning symbols in that city or county. Every city and county in California is required to develop a general plan. This plan, when approved by the local legislative body, becomes the comprehensive zoning for the area. Enabling legislation gave cities and counties the right to control land use through zoning. Adoption of zoning and changes in zoning require public hearings. Cities are required to bring their zoning into conformance with their general plan. Spot zoning allows the zoning of individual parcels that are not in conformance with the general area zoning. Spot zoning is often the result of political influence. Spot zoning that is arbitrary and discriminatory will not be upheld by California courts. Downzoning is a change in zoning to a more restrictive use. Variance. A variance is a special exception to the zoning. Although the zoning is not changed, conditional use permit, unlike a variance, which is simply an exception to the zoning, a conditional use permit, or special use permit, allows a use not permitted to every parcel. Non-conforming use zoning generally is not retroactive. Uses that exist before zoning are not automatically excluded by the zoning. These non-conforming uses generally are allowed to continue if they were legal when started. They are said to be covered by the laws of that time. Grandfather clause. Covenants, conditions, and restrictions. Covenants are private, Voluntary restrictions that run with the land. They are promises among landowners that are mutually enforceable. The remedy for a breach of a covenant will be damages or an injunction. Conditions differ from covenants in that they create a defeasible estate. A breach of a condition subsequent means that title will be lost. Usually it will revert to the original grantor or his or her heirs. Because of the harsh penalty of forfeiture, courts will construe conditions narrowly and, if at all possible, will determine that a covenant rather than a condition was intended. Covenants, conditions, and restrictions, CCRs, also known as restrictive covenants, can cover setbacks, lot size, height, building size, outbuildings, materials, colors, landscaping, signs, pets, etc. CCRs can go beyond zoning because they are private agreements not limited to health, safety, morals, and the general welfare. CCRs might set up architectural review committees for approval of plans. The committee's actions must be in good faith to prevail if they are challenged in court. CCRs are generally beneficial restrictions in that they tend to keep up property values. CCRs can be enforced by anyone subject to them. When CCRs and the zoning are at variance, whichever is more restrictive generally will prevail. A LACAs can prevent enforcement. If, because of a failure to enforce, a party acts to their detriment, the court might consider that allowing enforcement would not be equitable. An example of LACAs would be allowing another to build a structure, with your knowledge, that is not in compliance with the CCRs. Waiting until the building was completed before objecting could be considered LACAs, because the delay allowed others to act to their detriment. The statute of limitations for bringing action against a restriction is 5 years from the time of discovery. The Subdivision Map Act. The Subdivision Map Act provides for local control of subdivisions. Every city and county is required to adopt an ordinance to regulate subdivisions. Subdivided lands law. Subdivided land sales fall under the jurisdiction of the Department of Real Estate. The primary purpose of the Subdivided Lands Law is to protect purchasers in new subdivisions from fraud, misrepresentation, or deceit in the marketing of subdivided lots, parcels, units, and undivided interests. The disclosures provide the buying public with knowledge of essential facts so that an informed decision to purchase can be made. A subdivision under the Subdivided Lands Law is a division of 5 or more parcels for the purpose of sale, lease, or financing. Public report. Generally, no subdivision can be offered for sale in California until the Real Estate Commissioner has issued a public report. Public reports are disclosure statements. They include information on location, the size of the offering, the identity of the subdivider, and the interest to be conveyed to the purchaser or lessee, as well as provisions for handling deposits, purchase money, taxes, assessments, etc. Also included are use restrictions, unusual costs that a buyer will have to bear at the time of purchase or in the future, hazards or adverse environmental findings, special permits required, and utilities availability. The report is intended to provide information to aid a potential buyer in making a purchase decision. Interstate Land Sales Full Disclosure Act. The Federal Interstate Land Sales Full Disclosure Act is administered by the Office of Interstate Land Sale Registration, OILSR, of HUD. A disclosure statement known as the property report is required for subdivisions of 100 or more unimproved residential lots offered for sale in interstate commerce. Purchasers have a 7-day right of rescission after signing the purchase agreement. Environmental Law. National Environmental Policy Act, NEPA. The Federal National Environmental Policy Act applies to federal agencies and legislation significantly affecting the quality of human environment. Federal action requires an environmental impact statement, EIS, if the action significantly affects the quality of life. The EIS gathers relevant data along with an analysis of its effects. California Environmental Quality Act, CEQA, California's law. The California Environmental Quality Act, Public Resources Code 21000 ITSC, allows local government agencies to require environmental impact reports for private and government projects that may have a significant effect on the environment. Alquist Priolo Special Studies Zone Act. A special studies zone is a geological hazard zone on a potentially active earthquake fault line. Zones customarily are 1/4 of a mile or more wide, centering on the fault. The Alquist Priolo Special Studies Zone Act requires that geological reports be obtained for project approvals within the zones and that prospective purchasers of property in the zones be made aware of the facts. Coastal Zone Conservation Act. To develop land within a designated coastal zone, Either a coastal development permit or an exemption from the provisions of the Coastal Zone Conservation Act is required. Suits for latent defects in the development of lots can be brought for up to 10 years after the completion of improvements, but within 3 years of discovery of damage. For builder liability, there is a 4-year statute of limitations for patent defects and a 10-year statute for latent defects. Unit Quiz 1. The power to zone was given to cities and counties by A. The U.S. Constitution. B. The 13th Amendment. C. Enabling Acts. D. The U.S. Supreme Court. Answer C. Enabling Acts. 2. Least likely to be upheld by California courts is rezoning that would A. Eliminate any beneficial use of the land. B. Result in a reduction of value. C. Reduce the use density. D. B. Downzoning. Answer A. Eliminate any beneficial use of the land. 3. Zoning that allows a single-family home to be built in an area zoned for apartments is an example of A. Downzoning. B. Cumulative zoning. C. Spot zoning. D. Bulk zoning. Answer B. Cumulative zoning. 4. Covenants differ from conditions in that breach of A. Covenant can be legally enforced. B. Condition could result in forfeiture. C. Covenant can only be enforced by the HO. D. Covenant can result in forfeiture. Answer B. Condition could result in forfeiture. 5. Zoning that prohibits adult entertainment within an area is A. Inclusionary zoning. B. Exclusionary zoning. C. Illegal. D. Downzoning. Answer B. Exclusionary zoning. 6. Zoning for density is known as A. Incentive zoning. B. Bulk zoning. C. Exclusionary zoning. D. Inclusionary zoning. Answer B. Bulk zoning. 7. Which is true of a non-conforming use? A. It can be retroactive. B. It refers to private restrictions. C. It was illegal use before zoning. D. The use must be allowed to continue for the owner's lifetime. Answer C. It was illegal use before zoning. 8. New zoning that prohibits an existing use would not provide for A. Immediate closure. B. The time period for closure. C. Prohibition of expansion. D. Continuation of use by a non-conforming user. Answer A. Immediate closure. 9. The most likely action for violation of a deed covenant would be A. Action for injunction. B. Forfeiture. C. Action for specific performance. D. Liquidated damages. Answer A. Action for injunction. 10. Which is true of restrictive covenants? A. They run with the land. B. If not recorded, they are not binding on a subsequent purchaser without notice. C. They are usually negative covenants. D. All of these are true. Answer D. All of these are true. 11. Deed restrictions are created by A. The Local Building Commission. B. The Planning Commission. C. Action of law. D. The grantors. Answer D. The grantors. 12. A copy of the CCRs requested by an owner in a condominium, cooperative, or community apartment project must be furnished within A. 10 days. B. 20 days. C. 30 days. D. 45 days. Answer A. 10 days. 13. Which CCR would most likely be enforceable? A. One that prohibits resale. B. One that prohibits resale for more than a stated price. C. One that prohibits resale to a minority buyer. D. One that requires property to be used only for religious purposes. Answer D. One that requires property to be used only for religious purposes. 14. The Subdivision Map Act is concerned with A. Physical aspects of the subdivision. B. Protection of the title in the purchaser. C. Prevention of seller fraud. D. All of these. Answer A. Physical aspects of the subdivision. 15. The Subdivided Lands Law is concerned primarily with A. Preventing objectionable uses. B. Providing adequate space. C. Protecting purchasers. D. Protecting brokers. Answer C. Protecting purchasers. 16. The Subdivided Lands Law does not apply to A. California subdivisions. B. Nevada subdivisions sold in California. C. Division into 4 parcels for the purpose of sale. D. Condominiums. Answer C. subdivision into 4 parcels for the purpose of sale. 17. When 3 1-acre parcels are to be sold from a 9-acre parcel each year for 3 years, the sellers must comply with A. The MAP Act. B. The Subdivided Lands Law. C. Both of these. D. Neither of these. Answer C. Both of these. 18. The Subdivided Lands Law covers A. Undivided interests. B. Out-of-state subdivisions sold in California. C. Timeshares. D. All of these. Answer D. All of these. 19. The Subdivision Map Act applies to A. Agricultural leases. B. 2 or more parcels. C. Out-of-state subdivisions. D. Timeshares. Answer B. 2 or more parcels. 20. Public reports expire A. 5 years from the date of the first sale. B. 5 years from the date of the last sale. C. 5 years from the date of issuance. D. 1 year after issuance. Answer C. 5 years from the date of issuance. 21. A subdivider who has not received a final public report but is able to enter into binding contracts with purchasers has a preliminary public report. B. Conditional public report. C. Variance. D. Conditional use permit. Answer B. Conditional public report. 22. 7 parcels of land were subject to a restrictive covenant limiting use for residential purposes. A woman acquired all 7 parcels and intends to build a commercial property in conformance with zoning. Which of the following describes her rights? A. She will not be issued a building permit because the use would violate the restrictions. B. The restrictive covenant is terminated by merger. C. Any former owner can obtain an injunction to stop the project. D. Anyone can enforce the restrictions. Answer B. The restrictive covenant is terminated by merger. 23. Which is true of the Interstate Land Sales Full Disclosure Act? A. There is a 60-day right of rescission. B. It applies to 100 or fewer parcels. C. The California Public Report can be used to satisfy the disclosure requirements. D. All of these are true. Answer C. The California Public Report can be used to satisfy the disclosure requirements. 24. The statute of limitations for builder liability is A. 4 years for patent defects and 10 years for latent defects. B. 1 year. C. 3 years. D. 10 years for patent defects and 4 years for latent defects. Answer A. 4 years for patent defects and 10 years for latent defects. 25. Excluded from strict liability for defects are A. Latent defects. B. Developers of lots. C. Builders. D. Subcontractors. Answer D. Subcontractors. Case example.